Most people live their lives chasing to be liked, admired, or accepted. Since childhood, we are trained to measure our worth by the eyes of others: parents, teachers, friends, colleagues, even lovers. Every smile, every nod, every word of approval becomes a tiny reward for compliance. Every criticism becomes a dagger of shame. And in this endless pursuit, we slowly forget the one person we should never abandon: ourselves. Nietzsche called this the herd instinct. He saw how easily men surrender their will to the judgment of the crowd, how they allow others to dictate their values, their choices, their very identity. The man who lives for others, who bends and twists to fit society's invisible mold, is not living at all. He is existing like a shadow wandering through a world that will never notice him, because his energy is spent seeking validation instead of claiming his life. Consider your own life for a moment. How often do you ask for permission without realizing it? How often are your decisions filtered through the silent question, "What will they think?" The approval of others becomes your currency. The applause of strangers becomes the measure of your worth. And the more you chase it, the further you drift from the man you were meant to become. The cost is profound, yet subtle. Anxiety gnaws at your mind. Your ambitions shrink under the weight of imagined judgment. Joy becomes conditional, tethered to applause and recognition. Even success feels hollow if it is measured only by others' reactions. Nietzsche called this the tragedy of the herd, a slow suffocation of the spirit, a life spent complying with invisible rules that serve no one but the masses. But there is hope. Even now, in the quiet corners of your mind, you may sense it, a flicker of resistance, a whisper of revolt. Nietzsche calls this the spark of self-overcoming. It is the moment when you begin to question the authority of the crowd, when you sense that life could be lived for yourself, on your terms, guided by your values, not theirs. And in that moment, the first crack appears in the prison. A crack that, if nurtured, can widen into a doorway to freedom, a doorway to life lived without apology, without the chains of approval, without the constant gaze of others deciding your worth. A life where the only judgment that matters comes from the mirror, and the reflection looking back is someone unbroken, unapologetic, and fully alive. Because Nietzsche knew this truth, the one who cannot stand alone will never truly live. And the moment you recognize it, even if it terrifies you, is the moment everything begins to change. Once you understand the prison of approval, you begin to see another truth. Most people never meet themselves. They live behind masks, carefully constructed, endlessly adjusted, always designed to be acceptable, admired, or loved. We hide our desires, our thoughts, even our fears, sculpting a version of ourselves that pleases the world. And in doing so, we become strangers to our own souls. Nietzsche called this the tragedy of slave morality. It is the system where the values of the herd replace the values of the individual, where the approval of others dictates what is right, what is wrong, what is worthy. Today, it hides in subtle forms. Social media likes, professional titles, the constant comparison of lives curated for public consumption. Every post, every performance, every word is a carefully measured act, a quiet demand for validation. And every time we adjust ourselves to be accepted, we drift further from the man we were born to become. So, think of it. The man who laughs when he doesn't feel joy, who pretends to care about things that do not move him, who chases experiences to fit the image others expect. His life is not his own. Every achievement becomes a transaction, every smile a contract, every relationship a test he must pass to be approved. And when the mask slips, when the world sees a moment of truth, fear rises. Fear of rejection, fear of shame, fear of being alone. This is the invisible violence of approval seeking. It erodes authenticity slowly, silently, until one day you may realize you cannot remember who you were before the world told you who to be. You may have wealth, friends, status, yet feel an emptiness that no applause can fill. The mask protects you, but it also imprisons you. And Nietzsche's warning is clear: the more you seek to be liked, the further you fall from life itself. But here lies a choice. Awareness is the first rebellion. Seeing the mask for what it is, a tool forged for acceptance, not freedom, is the first step toward reclaiming yourself. To begin stripping it away is terrifying. You risk judgment, criticism, isolation. But Nietzsche believed that this is the path of the free man, the one who dares to be true even when the world rejects him. Because only when you shed the masks, only when you stop performing for others, do you find the space to breathe. Only then do you start to discover the man beneath the expectations, the man whose life belongs to no one but himself. And in that discovery lies power. A quiet, unstoppable power that grows every time you choose truth over comfort, authenticity over approval, self over the crowd. So look closely at your life. Ask yourself which parts are yours and which are borrowed from the expectations of others. The mask may feel safe, but it is nothing more than a cage. And Nietzsche's lesson is undeniable. If you never remove it, you will never know freedom. If you never remove it, you will never know yourself. True freedom carries a cost. The moment a man abandons the pursuit of approval, he steps onto a road few dare to tread. Rejection is inevitable. Misunderstanding is guaranteed. Those who cling to the herd will resist, even resent, the presence of a man who refuses their validation. Nietzsche recognized this truth. The individual who dares to define his own values becomes a target precisely because he is no longer predictable, no longer confined by expectation. To be free is to be prepared for solitude. It is to accept that fear and discomfort are part of the price of authenticity. Every act of self-determination risks criticism, loss, or hostility. Friends may question, lovers may falter, colleagues may turn away. And yet the man who values truth above comfort persists. He understands that the approval of others is a fleeting illusion, and the loyalty of the self is eternal. This is the paradox Nietzsche described. The one who fears nothing but compromise will find life simultaneously harsher and richer. Harsh because rejection cuts deep. Rich because every act of defiance restores power that was once surrendered. In rejecting the herd, the man discovers that the world's approval was never necessary for his life to have meaning. His value is intrinsic, not borrowed. His identity is self-created, not granted. Freedom demands courage, the courage to be disliked, misunderstood, or even hated. It demands the willingness to endure social friction without surrender, to walk paths others deem unacceptable. And in this courage, the individual begins to reclaim the energy that was wasted on performing, on appeasing, on bending to the collective will. Every moment spent living honestly is a step toward power, a step toward clarity, a step toward life lived on one's own terms. The world may resist, the herd may attack. But those who persevere begin to notice a strange effect. Authenticity attracts, not shallow approval, but deep resonance. The man who no longer requires admiration begins to cultivate influence through integrity. He creates, he acts, he commands attention, not through compliance, but through the unmistakable force of self-mastery. Nietzsche's vision of the Übermensch is found here, the individual who forges his own path, defines his own morality, and embraces the solitude and rejection that such a life demands. To live in accordance with one's own truth is to risk hostility, but it is the only path to liberation. And so the moment arrives, the one who no longer seeks to be liked, who no longer fears rejection, who faces hatred without compromise. He begins to step into life fully. He has discovered that freedom is not granted, it is claimed, and in claiming it, he finally begins to live. To become who you are, Nietzsche wrote, you must first abandon the safety of imitation. True power is not granted by others. It is claimed in solitude, forged through discipline and tempered in the quiet trials of self-reflection. After shedding the masks, after enduring the rejection of the herd, the path forward is no longer outward. It turns inward, to the raw, unfiltered work of discovering the man beneath the expectations, beneath the judgments, beneath the fear. This is the reconstruction phase. The mind, once bent by approval, begins to recalibrate. You learn to measure yourself by your own standards, your own values. Every action, every choice, every thought becomes a test, not of how the world perceives you, but of how faithfully you follow your own principles. Strength is rebuilt not in comfort, but in the repeated exercise of self-command, the consistent refusal to compromise what is essential, the conscious cultivation of independence. Here lies Nietzsche's challenge. Few have the courage to face themselves fully. Solitude is a crucible. Silence can feel like accusation. The weight of unfiltered self-examination can break men who are accustomed to distraction and approval. But those who endure, those who embrace the labor of becoming, emerge stronger, clearer, more alive. In that effort lies the power that the world cannot give, the power to decide, to act, to live entirely on one's own terms. It is here, in the deliberate shaping of one's inner life, that life begins to open. The man who once moved according to the crowd now moves with purpose. Desire is no longer dictated by others. Joy is no longer conditional. Even suffering becomes a teacher, a mirror reflecting the integrity of the self. The individual emerges as an architect of his own destiny, no longer a prisoner of applause or fear, but a sovereign of his existence. And yet, this transformation is ongoing. Becoming who you are is not a moment. It is a continuous process of choice, reflection, and discipline. Every decision is an assertion of self. Every act of courage a brick in the structure of your character. Nietzsche's path is not easy. It is rigorous, solitary, demanding. But it is the only path to true inner power. The only path to life unchained by approval. In the silence of this self-overcoming, you finally meet the man you have always been running from. Stronger, freer, whole. And in that discovery, the door to life opens fully. No longer through the eyes of others, but through your own unwavering gaze. The moment you no longer live for the approval of others, life itself begins to unfold in ways that were once impossible. You discover clarity in decision-making, strength in solitude, and purpose unshakable by opinion. Nietzsche's warning was never about comfort, it was about transformation. The man who breaks free from the herd does not simply escape chains. He steps into a world that rewards authenticity with the deepest kind of freedom. Approval is fleeting. Praise can be withdrawn in an instant. But self-approval, self-mastery, and the courage to live on your own terms create a foundation no one can shake. The man who has shed the masks, endured the rejection, and faced the solitude of his own mind finds that the world no longer controls him. He moves through it with presence, confidence, and the quiet authority of one who answers only to himself. This liberation brings clarity to desire. You no longer chase what others tell you to want. You pursue what aligns with your principles, your talents, and your vision. Relationships deepen because they are chosen, not performed. Work becomes meaningful because it reflects your own standards, not the applause of the crowd. Even suffering transforms. No longer a source of shame or fear, it becomes a mirror of growth, a teacher revealing strength you never knew you had. And yet, the journey does not end. Life continues to test, to challenge, to provoke. The difference is profound. The man who no longer seeks approval faces these trials as himself, unbroken, undistracted, uncompromised. Nietzsche's ideal was never a life without hardship, but a life lived fully in accordance with one's own values. regardless of the world's judgment. This is the essence of true power, true freedom, and true living. Imagine the weight lifted from a life previously dictated by others. Every decision, every step, every moment becomes infused with clarity, energy, and purpose. The approval you once chased now feels irrelevant. The fear of judgment dissolves, and what remains is life in its purest form, vivid, unmediated, and entirely yours. Nietzsche's message is uncompromising. The herd will always demand conformity, the world will always offer judgment, and approval will always be conditional. But there is a way beyond. A life claimed through courage, solitude, and relentless self-overcoming. The man who dares to reject external validation, who faces rejection without compromise, who masters his own mind and will, finally walks a path unbound. And in that freedom, life opens. Opportunities once obscured by fear now appear. Relationships once shallow now deepen. Purpose once diluted now clarifies. The applause of others is no longer needed because the only voice that matters is your own. In rejecting the herd, in rejecting the endless pursuit of approval, you finally meet the man you were always meant to be. Stronger, freer, alive. And in that presence, the world itself bends, not to demand your obedience, but to reflect the unshakable life you have chosen. Because Nietzsche understood this, life is not given to those who please others. It is granted to those who dare to stand alone, claim themselves, and live fully, without apology. And when you reach that point, everything finally opens. If this message resonates with you, subscribing to our channel costs nothing, but it gives us everything. Your support allows us to continue sharing ideas that challenge, awaken, and inspire. Join the journey. Stand with us. Live for yourself. Because life opens fully only when you choose your own path. And the first step starts now.